Welcome. I'm Lawrence Kreisman, and I retired as Program Director for Historic Seattle in 2017. And for 20 years, I brought public attention to the Northwest's architectural heritage and its preservation through tours, workshops, lectures, books, and articles. Today, I'd like to share with you the ways in which the abundant natural and manufactured resources of our region contributed to the growth and physical development of the city. How could anyone resist the allure of the Pacific Northwest? Exquisite, unspoiled scenery, open space, employment opportunities, and a new life awaited, away from known and often unhappy experiences in the congested industrial East and Midwest. As M.A. Matthews summed it up nicely in 1904, he said, extolling the virtues of living in Seattle, quote, "Nature and art have agreed to live together in this city in perfect peace and harmony." Native Americans had known this for thousands of years. Their lands and water provided food, shelter, transportation, and ceremony. Indian groups along the Puget Sound used wood for the construction of homes and canoes, baskets and mats, red cedar in particular. Managing the forest also opened up some areas to game animals for planting crops to sustain their communities. Western Washington's forest yielded dense stands of Douglas fir, hemlock, spruce, and cedar from the Cascades to the water's edge. Until 1848, forests sustained several Indian tribes and fascinated Anglo explorers with the density, height, and girth of its trees. During this first period, the lumber industry was still in its infancy, with the Hudson Bay Company erecting the first mill at Fort Vancouver in 1828. The gold rush in California brought a second phase in which outside investors, mostly from San Francisco, built mills along Puget Sound, setting the stage for a key motivation for the economy. And from 1883 to 1940, lumber companies intensively logged areas they could not reach before. Workers' housing supported the shipbuilding, coal mining, and lumber mills in the region. The Hall Brothers Shipyard and the Port Blakely Mill on Bainbridge Island were early examples, as was the Snoqualmie Falls Lumber Company east of Seattle. Most of the evidence of these early communities has disappeared. Expansion of the railway, the Northern Pacific into Tacoma by 1887, and the Great Northern into Seattle in 1893, and shipping lanes made the shipping of Northwest timber east, south, and across the Pacific Rim possible. The many saw and shingle mills provided new settlers with building materials for commercial and residential buildings, downtown and in the neighborhoods. Wood was cheap and easy to access, and it was the perfect local building material, with one exception. It was combustible. Seattleites discovered that when much of the central business district went up in flames in June 1889, leaving only the ghost of its commercial street and a few surviving bank or hotel facades that had been constructed in stone or brick. The rebuilding was quick, and it relied upon materials that could better withstand fire, brick and stone. Thus began Seattle's love affair with brick. Bricklayers and masons came from all over the United States to help Seattle rebuild. Daniel Houlihan, an experienced bricklayer, came from California to help pave the city's roads and sidewalks. While working in Seattle, he looked for clay deposits to use for the brick plant, and he eventually found an ideal location at the base of Beacon Hill. The deposit was close enough to Puget Sound to allow brick to be efficiently transported by barge. Houlihan founded Builders Brick Company, Mutual Materials' predecessor, on the site in 1900, and Builders Brick went on to supply much of the brick that rebuilt and continues to build Seattle. And an aside is that this Newcastle plant that they had is now the site of a housing development. Two types of rock entered the city, sandstone and granite. A quarry in Index, 35 miles northeast of Seattle, supplied the salt and pepper granite. Sandstone came from three quarries. Bellingham Quarry supplied the Chuckanut, while other quarry sites were near Tenino, 12 miles southeast of Olympia, and Wilkeson, 15 miles east of Tacoma. Tenino stone was used for the Broderick Building on 2nd Avenue of 1892, and it also can be seen in the John and Eliza Leary mansion on 10th Avenue East on the right-hand side, and quarry owner Thomas Russell's residence on 14th Avenue East, which was called Millionaire's Row. It's seen in the background with James Moore's Redstone Mansion beforeground. Wilkeson sandstone also faces the Skinner Building on the 5th Avenue Theatre, as well as other downtown buildings. Seattle's growth had not come about without major engineering prowess that involved Herculean earth moving and regrading in the central business district. It was only a matter of time before privately financed railways, cable cars, and streetcar lines laid their track along Yesler Way, Madison Street, and James Street to Lake Washington, north along Lake Union to Ballard, Fremont, Latona, and Brooklyn, and south to Columbia City and Renton. The city promoted its potential leadership in the Pacific Rim of Nations by mounting the Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition in 1909. Its Torrey entry gates, a melding of native and Asian design, symbolized the message. The exposition exemplified the City Beautiful movement, and it influenced architects and city planners to lay the groundwork for attractive and workable cities. Virgil Bogue's 1911 Seattle plan looked comprehensively at the city's civic expression in architecture, at monumental avenues on access to major government and transportation centers, and transportation and circulation improvements that would address city growth for years to come. Major plans of this nature were impressive, but they did not move the tax-paying public. Nevertheless, aspects of the plan lived on in the broader transportation and port recommendations in Seattle, and a group of distinctive, classically inspired civic, institutional, and commercial buildings. The steel-framed commercial blocks that were built in the Financial and Business Center starting in 1904 were sheathed in brick and terracotta. The steel was generally shipped out from the east. Peter Kirk had established the Great Western Iron and Steel Company in the 1890s in Kirkland with the intent of building a smelter and a steel mill to refine local ore discovered near Snoqualmie Falls by pioneer Arthur Denny. He was hoping to transform it into steels for rails and other purposes, and at the time, rails were being shipped from Great Britain. If it had been successful, it would have held basically a monopoly on the entire Pacific Northwest steel production. However, the company went bankrupt in the Panic of 1893, and the mostly completed mill never really produced any steel for Seattle buildings. Fortunately, other companies were successful. A steel mill founded by the Puget family of Packard fame was built in 1904 and started making steel in 1905. It was originally run as the Seattle Rail Car Company, and then under a number of different names until the 1920s, when it was purchased by Bethlehem Steel. In the 1980s, it was sold again to Seattle Steel, then to Birmingham Steel in 1991, and when Birmingham Steel filed for bankruptcy in 2002, Nucor Steel purchased the assets. The facility near the Duwamish River, which was once proclaimed as Seattle's Little Pittsburgh, has provided steel locally and for shipment throughout the Pacific Northwest, Northern California, and Canada. The mill has the flexibility to produce 1.1 million tons of steel each year, primarily rebar and shapes consisting of angles, flats, and channels. Another key building material was manufactured early and locally, Portland cement and concrete for foundations and infrastructure. Portland cement, stone, sand, and water are the basic ingredients of the concrete products that allowed for highways, bridges, and commercial buildings, as well as dams and residences. One of the city's earliest of concrete structures, the Georgetown steam plant, opened in 1906. Ash Grove Cement Company was incorporated in Missouri in 1882 as the Ash Grove White Lime Association, headquartered in Overlake Park, Kansas, it operated cement plants in many states, 9 of them, and they included the plant on the Duwamish, which is still producing. There were also some local manufacturers. Another material, cast concrete, was often a less expensive option than terracotta was for buildings and embellishment, as you can see here. Terracotta cladding and its use as ornamentation was popular in architecture built between 1890 and 1930 as a solution to fireproofing. Product development led to its imitating more expensive materials, such as granite and marble, and provided matching decorative ornamentation to brick buildings. In the Northwest, terracotta was supplied in the 1880s and the 1890s by 4 manufacturers: the Puget Sound Fire Clay Company of Seattle and Renton, the Northern Clay Company in Auburn, the Washington Brick, Lime, and Sewer Pipe Company in Spokane, and Gladding McBean in Lincoln City, California. Headquarters for the Puget Sound Fire Clay Company was at First Avenue and Jackson Street, with its plant on the former site of the Boeing Administrative Building south of downtown. The company had financial difficulties and was taken over by Arthur Denny in 1892 to become the Denny Clay Company. Soon it was producing in Taylor near Black Diamond, where the clay was mined, along with coal. It merged with the Renton Clay Company in 1905 to become the Denny Renton Clay and Coal Company. The Arctic and the Times Square building were made of Denny Renton terracotta. The Northern Clay Company of Auburn was organized in 1900 and got its clay from the banks of the Green River. The Coliseum Theatre was clad in the company's satin white terracotta. It was not a simple process. B. Marcus Pertica, who designed the Coliseum, also designed the natatorium, which required 500 different sizes and shapes, with a total of over 7,850 pieces for the whole surface. Other Northern Clay works in the downtown include the old Frederick and Nelson department store and the Joshua Green building. Although Gladding McBean was not local, the firm did 95 buildings in Seattle, from the Pioneer Building in 1889 to the Venturi Brown designed Seattle Art Museum. Many works were done while the other 2 companies were prospering, including the Hogue Building, the Olympic Hotel, the Dexter Horton Building. Gladding McBean bought out the Northern Clay Company in 1925 and the Denny Renton Clay and Coal Company in 1927. And while the company struggled to survive during the Great Depression, it consolidated its business in California and still is the major producer of terracotta. One local sculptor, Victor Schneider, worked on a number of important projects in Washington state. Here he is next to one of his monumental terracotta eagles for Spokane Fraternal Hall. Perhaps his most memorable work in Seattle are the terracotta reliefs of Chief Seattle that crowned the Cobb Building and its companion, the White Henry and Stewart buildings, now the site of the Rainier Tower. Prior to the Great Depression, 4 different shades of brick from Beacon Hill earth and terracotta ornament were used creatively by Albertson, Wilson, and Richardson in their Northern Life Tower to mirror Mount Rainier's snow-capped peaks and to reflect the many cultural influences of the Pacific Rim of Nations. For the Exchange Building facade, the John Graham Company used Romanite, which is a cast stone that mimics sandstone, and French-inspired Art Deco ornamentation. The great number of houses built in Seattle during this period were either straightforward American four-squares or craftsman homes and bungalows, and entrepreneurs such as Judd Yoho promoted his craftsman bungalow company at potlatch parades. He and many other companies published catalogs of house plans that made ease for first-time homebuyers to order complete plans, invest in streetcar suburbs, and have homes of their own. While we had ready access to inexpensive fir and river rock, frequent rail service made it a simple task to order from Sears and Roebuck and other home companies who would ship out everything you needed to build a bungalow. The Standard Furniture Company even produced a home fair at its 2nd Avenue and Pine Street location, filling its two-story atrium with river rock bungalow and wicker furniture. The popularity of the bungalow reflected an ongoing interest in vernacular regionalism. The idea of rustic simplicity, native materials, and hand-built character was realized in informal summer cottages and more substantial townhomes. One example is Ellsworth Storey. Fresh back from a trip to Switzerland in 1904, he took some of the form ideas from the vernacular chalet to design two interconnected houses for his own family and for his parents. Here you see him working on local river rock. He built with shingle, with white overhangs, with his own signature ribbon windows to make a unique vocabulary that he also used in other commissions. You have only to look at these photographs of the Seattle skyline taken in the previous decade to see how quickly changes can come to this city. It's a credit to the Smith Tower that it can still hold its own, dwarfed by new high-rises. Some of that strength is its shimmering terracotta skin that will never be matched by reflective glass, concrete panels, or its lightweight substitute glass fiber reinforced concrete. But the changes we see are nothing new. They're a long-established pattern captured in this circa 1910 epigram produced by a Seattle company, Ivy Press. It says, "Things move along so rapidly these days that people who always say, 'It can't be done,' are interrupted by somebody quietly doing it while he's up in the air about it." So thank you for listening, and I hope it will inspire you to do a little bit of exploration on your own and looking at buildings more closely, to become a member of Historic Seattle, and to read about some of the history of the city and its marvelous built heritage on your spare time. Thank you.